Cybersecurity concerns are ever evolving. OT cybersecurity is even more complex, and it's so much more than just software and hardware. How do you stay on top of it all? Aaron Crow has over 25 years experience with cybersecurity. 15 of those years focused on operational technology across multiple industries, and he wants to help you. Welcome to the Protect OT Cybersecurity Podcast, brought to you by Industrial Defender. Now here's your host, Aaron Crow.
Awesome. Super excited to have this conversation. Clint and I were able to sit down for a while. We've known each other for a while now, but able to meet in person and engage at Black Hat, which is also always so good to go to events like that and meet people that you've known online. You've maybe even worked with in the past. My time at EY, you and I worked a little bit together and such. So it was great to sit down with you, meet over a coffee and in between conversations at Black Hat, et cetera. So Clint, why don't you introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for having me. My name is Clint Bodungen, and I'm a 25 plus year career cybersecurity, whatever you want to call it nowadays, veteran. And, because back in the day, it was more than just It wasn't cybersecurity. Cybersecurity wasn't a word when I got in this, right? It was system security, InfoSec or whatever. But I've been specializing in industrial cybersecurity since 2003 or so. So been doing it for a long time. Currently the founder and CEO, and CEO is it's one of those terms. It's like I just get it by default because I'm a founder. But the founder and CEO of a startup called ThreatGEN, where we do game-based cybersecurity simulations and tabletop exercises as a service, I guess you could say. So, and then I'll tell you a little bit later, I guess, because this conversation is probably going to go this direction. So I'll tell you now that I also have another venture in machine learning for cybersecurity, where I'm currently doing a lot of research. I've been researching machine learning and cybersecurity for several years, and due to the recent explosion of things like ChatGPT, generative AI, large language models, I've been recently building a lot of applications on top of that. So that's kind of my most recent, I guess, excitement.
Yeah, so you and I worked together, again, my previous employer, building that red teaming and taking that tabletop exercise that we see so many times, and we're doing it in a paper exercise. We're in a room together, but really taking that and to your point, gamifying it, right? Really taking that video game mindset and bringing it in so it's fun. You don't have to teach a kid how to play a video game. He picks it up and he figures it out, right? And the same concept can be in what you've done at ThreatGEN is you don't have to teach a kid, you don't have to teach somebody how to understand and go through the process. They naturally learn because of the way games and video games work. Yeah. They can naturally improve their skill sets and their response. And okay, I remember last time I did that, I failed because of this. I died of dysentery, right? And the next time I get to that same question, I know what words to type in. I'm really dating myself with that question there, but talk a little bit about how did you start this? Like that idea is it's so simple yet so amazingly complex in kind of bridging those things.
Yeah, it was really interesting in how this actually got started. At the time, it's around 2013 or so. I was working for a company called Cymation. They were acquired by Accenture after I left. But
sure.
So, and I was sitting there with a group of people, as myself, Brian Mikesell, Dylan Beresford, all working on. It was also Eric Forner. We're all talking about how to better represent industrial environments more realistically in a training environment, because obviously you don't want to do too much active training, hacking, that kind of thing. And even test and development environments don't really suit the purpose, and HMIs get kind of boring, and reading PCAPs get kind of boring for most people. And so another person that was there is my current co-founder of ThreatGEN, Aaron Shabib. And we all just kind of sat around and said, well, maybe, and the actual realization came when I was playing Grand Theft Auto with another friend of mine, Matt Anderson, another founder of the company. And we're sitting there. I think it's Grand Theft Auto 4 or 5 where you're shooting up. You're like at a substation, a power plant. You're shooting it up, and I'm like, dude, we could do that. And so he looks at me and he says, shoot up a power station? And I said, no. But we could. Why can't we represent? If we can do it, it's just in video games. If we can represent a physical process environment in video games, well, that's it. That's what we do. I mean, video game physics are really good. So we became video game developers, and that's when we embarked on this. And ironically, the funny thing is that we're doing this for several months, and we're trying to figure out. We started like the Python gaming engine, Pygame, and looking at all these different things and learning how gaming development works, so we can develop this, because we're too nerdy to outsource this, right? We didn't want to outsource this game development. We're like, no, heck no. We want to do this. I've always wanted to be a game developer since I was a kid. And so after a certain amount of time, he goes, my brother is getting his PhD in game design at Central Florida. And I'm like, and you waited how long to tell me this? And so then all of a sudden he starts, giving us all this wisdom on things to do and things to build. And so we started off really building these 3D industrial like simulations. And we started taking it around to different cybersecurity conferences, and everybody, I remember my friend Matt Cowell, he was like, oh, it's really cool. I don't know how you're going to sell it, but it's really cool. And that really became a reality, in that we had something really cool. We were really onto something, but there was no business case for it. And then Michael Farnham, the founder of HughesatCon, he came to me and he goes, hey, because at one time I was teaching red team, blue team classes, which red team, blue team classes take like 5 days. They're a week long. INL, Idaho National Laboratories, they used to do one, they might still, but in this big, huge industrial cyber range. And he goes, hey, can you do a red team, blue team class for the class, and for a workshop for the conference? And I was like, oh yeah, sure. And he goes, can you do it in 1 day? I'm like, well, oh yeah, no, that's not going to happen. And so I sat down with Aaron and I'm like, well, maybe we can take a different approach. And I had been working on developing another game that was like kind of a card game, trading card game, civilization style, risk style, board game style. And I said, well, why don't we just do something like that and take a strategic angle, and we can probably do a red team, blue team simulation if we make this like strategy game, turn-based strategy game, like Battleship or Risk, and do that way. And so in 8 weeks, we developed a MVP, an alpha, and ran it at HughesatCon, and the rest is history. I mean, people just loved it. Dr. Art Conklin at the University of Houston, who has a SCADA security program and his master's of cybersecurity program, and he wanted to pilot in the class, and so we started piloting in universities, and yeah, the rest is history. It became a thing. In 2019, we quit our jobs and started doing this full time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And to go to the other extreme again, like the company I used to work for, they built a large scale at a manufacturing facility, MXD facility, kind of like INL. And that was the kind of the basis of their presentation and their demonstration there, was to showcase that. So as people are coming through, and you got to think about the people that may be going through there. Not all of them are cyber people. Like, you're going to get CISOs, and you're going to get salespeople, and you're going to get all flavors of people that are coming through there to see that. So they're not all going to be black hat, white. They're not going to be the guys at DEF CON that I was hanging out with last week, right? They're not super geeky, all of them. Some of them will be. And that's the cool thing about your platform is it can work for both. It can work for the super geeky guy and girl that wants to dive into the details and see why and try it 1,000 times. And it's also a good example for the sales guy or the CFO or the CEO to go through it one time and really understand, wow, this is really complex. And I understand why it's so hard and why I can't just throw a firewall in and fix all my problems. And, it really is able to visualize in a way that video games have a unique ability to do and showcase that very few other things have that ability. So it's really powerful to use as a crutch, and not a crutch, but a tool in your toolkit to be able to show complex situations in really simplified ways that are fun and intuitive.
Yeah, and we really do. It's one of those things to where people will say, well, who's your target audience? And we kind of, it is kind of like if you're in a company and you're touching cybersecurity or you're touching your network or anything like that, it is everybody in the company. We've had exercises and workshops to where we did have CISOs and CEOs right there with their engineers, and the simulation it simulates every aspect of, including like you got to get budget, and if you don't do the right things in game to compel management to open up that purse, then you're not getting budget, and that is a notorious sticking point in the game that everybody gets frustrated with, is getting budget. I'm like, well, it's like real life. And we would literally have C-level executives with their engineers unable to get budget, and they'll look over and they'll be like, is that what I do to you? And they're like, yes. And so everybody's getting it, not only from a strategic perspective, a cybersecurity perspective, but from that process and management perspective as well, because you do have to manage more than just putting in cybersecurity controls. And when but the reason why everybody gets something out of it is because you mentioned earlier that you don't have to teach a kid to play a video game. And shoot, I mean, adults, right? I mean, if you're Generation X or younger, you grew up most likely playing video games, and it's very rare. You may not always like them, or that might not be your thing, but I mean, at some point, almost everybody has played a video game to some extent, and most people like video games. So it's a natural learning medium. It's comfortable. Everybody is already familiar with that. It's very rare that I come across. I can count on one hand the amount of times that I've come across somebody in a group that's just like, yeah, this is BS. I don't like video games. I don't play it. I don't get it. Ironically, true story here. The people that get it the least are the people that need it the most. Right. Salespeople. Yeah. Every time I'm working with a sales team or someone, whether they want to resell or they want to pitch this to their as a tool, a sales tool or whatever, because a lot of people use this as a sales tool as well to help get the point across to their customers. Salespeople I don't know if salespeople don't play video games. I don't know if they just refuse to be technical, but man, salespeople have the biggest problem with this thing for some reason. But that's okay. They're not my target audience, but they should be.
So talk about, you kind of hinted at it in the beginning. How do you tie this into, the game, all of the game and video game and training and all that kind of stuff, tying that into machine learning and building that? Because it really sounds like it's almost the buzzword, a digital twin of my environment. And then that in of itself, it's one thing to have a range, but it's another thing to start doing some machine learning and large, that large learning model of taking a whole bunch of information and playing through, war games, playing through all the different scenarios of all the things that could happen and what's the most probable and how do I respond and how does it respond and then how do I respond and how does it respond, and kind of that back and forth, the computer playing chess against itself until it's better than the humans, which, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, we never thought that a computer would be able to beat a master level chess player playing chess.
Go,
and now,
right?
And now it's obvious that they're going to win every single time. We have no chance.
Yeah. So it's kind of a multi-part answer in that. So first of all, when you're talking about gaming environments, right? I mean, gaming environments, a gaming engine is the perfect cybersecurity testbed and training environment, because gaming is naturally competition, adversarial, right? So the adversarial nature of both, it sets the perfect stage for, any type of scenarios or any type of training method that you want to use in that environment. So when it comes to, using a gaming engine and using that engine, trying to use the gaming AI is what I should have said, is when you take that natural gaming AI and you want to convert it to something that can be used in the real world. In this case, we're talking about more probabilistic algorithms, right? Or we want to be able to use what we have instead of just training. We want to be able to use it for deterministic, probabilistic attack modeling and risk mitigation and that kind of thing. And I think that the first thing we have to understand is that, like, the ThreatGEN platform is not a cyber range. It is what we call a low fidelity or a strategic, non-technical cyber range. And it could also be considered a low fidelity digital twin, because we can replicate your assets, we can replicate your systems, we can replicate your workstations, your servers, we can replicate everything, IP addresses, MAC address, host name, everything in the environment, but there are no virtual machines. There are no computers with kernels and things like that. So because we're not too concerned with, it's not a CTF. So we're not too concerned if can I reproduce the exact exploitation mechanisms in order to pop this box or whatever. We're not training red teams to that level of fidelity. So, or that level of technicality.
Yeah.
When you get out of that minutia, right? When you pull it up at a strategic level, as long as we have what I call as Bob Ross security, I mentioned this to you earlier when we talked earlier today. I call this Bob Ross security, and those people that take my courses hear me say this a lot. Bob Ross security is, we don't need to paint in every single fine detail. All we need are indicators. So Bob Ross risk management, Bob Ross security is, if all we have are indicators, indications of things that exist, that are there or that are wrong, that is enough for us to make informed, probabilistic decisions. And so if we take that information and we say, well, we have these assets have these vulnerabilities have this level of difficulty, they are accessed in this way, and we have all those variables, we can use a gaming engine now to plug in those parameters, because all of a sudden you're going from a system that has millions of parameters. If you try to use every level of fidelity,
sure,
you have millions of parameters to take into account. Well, if we reduce that down to a more strategic level with just the indicators that we need, the gaming engine can handle that. And by the way, so can machine learning, so can a neural network. So we have two ways that we do that then. So we have the higher level machine, or the gaming AI. So we give it rules, it follows rules, and now it tries to go and do these things based on the parameters that it's given. And it does it in a realistic way because we have all the necessary high-level data that a system would, right? We don't care what kernel it's running at this point. We just know, is there a vulnerability? Can it be used? How is it accessed, et cetera? How difficult is it? And then the machine learning portion comes in. I've been studying machine learning in this since around, I guess sometimes a little after that. Once I got into gaming AI for us doing this, I really wanted to learn more about gaming AI, machine learning, and all the different categories. And so I started doing that. I did a few presentations, different conferences, and the Master Algorithm is a book that I recommend anybody who wants to learn more about machine learning algorithms and the differences and what they do without getting too technical in the weeds. It's a great book. But so I started learning about that and started understanding it. And of course, my co-founder, lead developer, Aaron, is much better at this than I am. And he actually developed a neural network, and he developed the algorithms to train the AI. So now what happens is every single time we have an environment, and that environment gets replicated in there, and you have maybe a new threat with new TTPs, then we put that in there. So now the AI has enough information. It knows the environment, it knows the TTPs, knows about the systems, the vulnerabilities, all the parameters in a way that it can deal with, because in the game, so the gaming AI now has all these rules and these parameters, and now we put it into training. So we can actually put the machine learning into training so it can find the most efficient ways to play, using a little bit of Bayesian theorem in there as well, so it can do predictive moves like chess. That's what a lot of your chess algorithms are based off, is Bayesian theories. And so from there, it starts to learn about, how I can play. If we can actually use the same training, if, like, let's say we wanted to replicate a particular style, like my beta tester, Greg, or myself, then we can give it the data from our games and it'll learn from that, and it can actually learn to mimic certain things and learn to have different tendencies and personalities and things like that. So ultimately, though, what you can really do with this, and I don't know if we don't want to let the cat out of the bag too much, do we? Come on, this is going to be our baby here, right? We don't want to let the cat out of the bag too much. So,
right.
Okay, let me just say this. Okay. So, ultimately what you can end up doing with this by using this level or this combination of gaming AI with machine learning is that this gives you enough fidelity, but still a high enough level to where it can operate. You can start to do some pretty good predictive analysis. You can start to predict where the most common attack vectors would be in your environment. And not only that, you can start to determine from the blue team. And this is where we could actually do some wargaming, some Matthew Broderick, 1980s war games, to where Joshua sits there and plays against himself and all the little lions going, choo, 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 choo. And then real fast, well, what you end up with is you end up with a system that can tell you the most probable attack vectors, the most and where. And then the blue team playing against the red team, all the AI playing against each other. The blue team then can say, well, okay, this is the best, most efficient, most cost-effective way to fix those attack vectors that are most likely. So using AI in this way and gaming engines to automate basically what would become a predictive risk management tool and an AI-driven predictive risk management tool. So, and yes, by the way, that's in development. So we're getting there.
That's awesome, and it really shows to what does this look like, right? So again, this is not a new concept. We talked about it multiple times now. War games, 1980s, Matthew Broderick, right? This concept has been around. Like, we've been thinking about this stuff since the 70s. And probably even before that, right? But this is not a new concept. Like, machine learning and using computers to go through, obviously they can compute a lot more possible outcomes than I can with a calculator. Like, I can be really good at math, but I'll never be good at math as a computer that's decent at math, right? And because they can they eat, sleep, and breathe that. That's all they do, right? So thinking that there's so many problems you could talk about. You talked about the predictive maintenance or the predictive analysis type of, it playing against itself and saying, hey, if I go make a change over here, then that gets me the biggest bang for buck. I can still get through, but I got to go X number of times, and I could probably detect that. Like, there's all this predictive analysis before. Right now, what people are doing is they're buying a product and putting it in, and then they're saying, okay, did that fix my problem? Like, they're plugging holes that they see in the wall one at a time without really any way to understand, is that the right thing I can do? Yeah. And granted, that's where the big four consultants and all those guys get paid a lot of money saying, hey, we think that you should do this. And yes, they have some numbers behind it and things like that. I'm not saying it's invaluable, but it's never going to be as good as a properly trained computer that can point out and try all those different things with real world data. Like, it really gets to the next level of understanding of how we can take this to the next level and really use that to our advantage to build these programs in the most efficient, cost effective way, while maintaining, our ability to run our process and not cripple our business and not be super complex and all that type of stuff. Right. And it's exciting.
What you've described is right. Most people let's see if this works, right? They're using statistical based reactive analysis, not predictive analysis, right? So reactive analysis is where basically I try something, see if it works. Nope. But I try something, see if it works. And then they're backing it with statistics, right? So they'll do statistical analysis to be able to say, well, based off of all these things, based off of data, based off this, we think that your answer is here. But statistical analysis is also not predictive analysis. The only way that you can get true predictive analysis is to use real data from the environment in question and being able to run simulations and use variable change analysis and to be able to use a combination of basically what amounts to Monte Carlo simulations, Bayesian theorem, in order to have AI give you a deterministic probability based on your environment, based on not statistics, but the actual setup, the actual trying different things, and it can actually then tell you what is a probable attack vector, what is a probable way to fix it, as opposed to just statistical analysis, reactive analysis, trial and error, reactive analysis, same thing, right? So, yeah, that's where we're wanting to go with this, and it's funny because you would think that, because people have asked me, are you able to start doing this now because of all, stuff like ChatGPT and being released and large language models? I'm like, no, this is That's totally different. Like, I mean, you can use large language models to help you write reports and to help to do some of the analysis somewhat. But no, these are machine learning techniques that have existed for a long time. And it's just the combination of using gaming technology, gaming engine, gaming theory. And that's what it is. It's game theory combined with statistical analysis and machine learning. Putting all that together is what gives us that ability, you know. And I think that people, and it took me becoming a game developer to realize this, but the industry at large does not think outside the box enough when it comes to risk mitigation. And part of the reason I do all this also is because in case you haven't been able to pick up on this yet, I'm a huge risk nerd. I'm a mathematics nerd. I love statistics and analysis and all that comes with that. And so it took me taking that passion, combining it with being a game developer, and then learning, honestly, quite frankly, game theory is the answer to figuring out how to, if you really think about it, red team, blue team, cybersecurity, it is a competitive sport. Sure. It's a serious sport, but we're in a competitive sport. And if you, quite frankly, it's esports, right? So if you think of cybersecurity is an esport, and so game theory, and it's competitive, so game theory makes a lot of sense. If you start taking into account game theory to start making predictive analysis and decisions off of your adversary, it kind of makes sense. So that's kind of what we figured out and what we're doing.
Well, and we've used, to your point, like we've used game theory for years in a lot of different situations, from military strategy to business and standing up and starting, you know, you can go through all these gamification systems to, you know, hey, I want to launch a startup, and, you know, this is how much I'm going to charge for my product and how many I'm going to sell, how many units do I have to sell, like all of those things, you know, hiring people and being able to see all that stuff and play it out before you ever open the LLC, before you ever hire your first person. You can play through all those things. We've been doing this in all industries for decades, and it is surprising, as advanced and technically capable as so many people are, that we're still thinking in this box. Well, we've always done it this way. Like this is you just buy a product and install it.
Yeah. Well, but also what you have to consider is that we've been gamifying cybersecurity, right? Red team, blue team exercises, things like that. So people have been gamifying, and there's a difference between gamification and game-based. We're not going to get into that. But either way, people have been gamifying cybersecurity for a while, but they haven't been using actual game theory for risk management.
Right.
That's the difference.
Yeah, and that is a massive difference, right? It's one thing to gamify and make it more fun or easily accessible from a training perspective and all those kind of things, but to use it in a, you know, Sun Tzu Art of War type gamification of, this is what my bad guy's going to do. These are my strengths and weaknesses. Well, let's use this weakness as a strength, and how can I turn that over and use my weakness as, you know, judo. All these types of things. Again, these are century old ideas, right? And we called them different things back then, but it's really that game theory of knowing, being 3 steps ahead of the bad guy, you know, the bad actor, the nation state, even the inside threat, or whatever that looks like, and really being able to play all of those. And that's a big thing in cyber. There's so many risks. There's insider threat, there's misconfigurations, there's nation state actors, there's vendors bringing in things. Like the list is infinite. There's no way a human, I believe I'm very good at what I do. There's no way that I can think of every potential possible outcome the way that a machine can, and see paths that I can't see. Like, I didn't even think about that. Like, you see these attacks in the news, a target attack or any of these things, they're never from the front door. They're always this ancillary backdoor system that nobody thought about. It's not like they weren't doing anything. They were doing what they thought was right, but they didn't see that gaping hole back in the corner because they just didn't think about it. Like, they were protecting up front and the back door was exposed, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's also another thing about this is that, you know, if you have a computer that can be doing all this, it could do it real time. You know, you and I talked about this at Black Hat, is that in your regular change management process, so every single time you make a change, you introduce the possibility for vulnerabilities, whether it's your process or your technology or whatever. And if you have a system like this that knows all these indicators and it knows all the data and the parameters, then when you change something, it can do a multitude of whether you want to do like a regression type, it'll be like a combination of regression algorithms and Bayesian algorithms to then be able to, in like very quickly on the fly, tell you what sort of new risks, new attack vectors, new vulnerabilities you may have introduced into your entire system with that one change. So now instead of going, okay, I have a change management worksheet, right? And it has a heat map of, 3x3 or 5x5 squares. And I have to answer these questions to say, I've done this, it has this, which is a paperwork exercise that means diddly. So at the end of the day, if you have something that can actually really analyze all of this stuff, because I hate the way we do risk management currently. Like, the CISSP, if it is, I don't know if they created it, but it's in the CISSP, the risk management formula of like annual rate or the annualized, I can't remember, annual rate of occurrence, right? ARO, your annual rate. Who knows that crap? You're pulling that out of your rear and filling in magic numbers, right? It's a wild guess, right? But if you have actual data that can be crunched in an instant to be able to tell you, hey, that thing you just did, that's going to introduce 3 more attack vectors, and it's going to increase your likelihood. Now all of a sudden becomes a real variable, a real value that can be measured, instead of me pulling this number out of my rear and just saying, I think it's going to happen maybe twice over the next 2 years. So, and so if you have that ability, that's real risk management. That's real risk analysis, being able to instantly measure all these parameters and give you a decision and say, hey, your probability of this thing getting popped based off what I know in the world and all this and everything going on is pretty high. You might want to fix that. And by the way, here's the most efficient and cost-effective way to fix that. So that's where we're headed. I mean, not just we, ThreatGEN, but that's where we're headed as an industry. Sure. And that's to me, that's the next frontier, using AI for probabilistic risk analysis.
Well, and it sounds like, so talk to this, right? It sounds like it works for the super mature process or environment or company, right? Or somebody just starting out. Because if I'm just starting out and I have nothing, I plug this in and I know, hey, if I had $1 to spend, where should I spend it? It also works for the super mature environment that has, $2 to spend and they've already spent $10. Where should I put these $2 and what am I missing? Yep. So it helps you get started. It helps you ramp up. It helps you with budgeting. It helps, in theory, you're able to say, if I only had $1, if I change it to $2, maybe the answers are different because I can do different things. But if I only have $1, where should I focus that time? Maybe it's process, maybe it's people, maybe it's a little bit on people, a little bit on process, and a little bit on technology. Like, what does that look like? It helps you start to gamify and show real world scenarios that say, if you do this, then this would be your outcome in the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and playing that over time. That's hugely powerful.
Yeah, and I think there's a bit of a difference there because there's 2 use cases we're essentially talking about here. Number one is using game-based solutions to train, right? So that you train like you fight like you train, right? So if I'm doing these things on a frequency and I'm doing them realistic with the most recent threats, then whenever it does hit the fan and I have an incident, my muscle memory is going to allow me to react appropriately as opposed to freaking out and freezing, combat freeze, right?
Sure.
So, but then the other thing we're talking about, there's that realistic training that you need and testing where the gaps in, by doing this, I can see the gaps in my incident response plan. I can see the gaps in a lot of it. So it's a little bit of analysis, but it's a lot of training your personnel. But then when you introduce that autonomous AI element that can do predictive analysis, that can do like multifaceted variable change analysis, to be able to see, okay, what did this change do? What is it going to do? And it can do it so quickly. Like there's no way we are entering an era to where cybersecurity can actually be real. It can be, we can have real calculations on ROI. We can have real risk analysis calculations. We can do real predictive analysis on likelihood because AI can move at the speed of instantly, right? It can move that fast, and it allows us to do these analyses and calculations that we have not been able to do with our brains and calculators, right? So that's the other part of it is using machine learning and using the power of algorithms and computer calculations and all these parameters to be able to determine, I guess, these outcomes. So predictive analysis for risk mitigation, and then using gamification to train your people, and then it's all encircled by using game theory and machine learning.
And see, this, people, is why it's fun to go to conferences and have awesome conversations like this, because it just, as you can see, if you can't tell with the back and forth with us, it's exciting, right? It's that new frontier, and to your point, it is coming. So it's not a matter of, and especially working in OT, we're so old school. We're so far behind in IT, and there's so much of this. Well, we've always done it this way. We've done it for 40 years. I can't, you can't do cloud. You can't do, any of these predictive. I can't actually take action. I can't scan an environment. Like, okay, no, why, right? And so many times I ask that question, and the look on the people's face on the other chair, and I've been in that chair, right? I've been the asset owner. I've worn the steel toe, the hard hats and the steel toe boots, right? I've been there. But when you ask that question, it's like I don't know. Like, it's not that they don't know. It's that nobody ever asks them that. Everybody knows that you can't scan actively in OT. Everybody knows that you don't want to control remotely, all these different things. But they never really ask why, or how could I do it? If I were going to do it, what would it look like to be safe, to be secure? Safe is relative, right? It's never secure, it's never safe, but to be comfortable. Where's that risk line? Is I'm below that risk line, but it's still improving my process. It's improving my ability to do my job and be more efficient and all those different types of things. That question, we have to continue to push that envelope. Like, we can't do it so fast, and especially in OT, that we're gonna put our processes at risk. But we also just can't pretend like we're never gonna change. Like, this is OT, I'm never gonna scan an OT environment. This is OT, it's never gonna go to the cloud. Like, that's just that's not gonna get you where you need to go, and you're gonna get left behind. And the attackers are not thinking that way. Like, they're coming at us, whether you connect it and you air gap it. That's not going to be enough to protect your environments.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a trade-off with technology when there's convenience versus security. And I hate to say it, but, having been doing this for more than 25 years, I can tell you convenience will always win out. And your users don't care about security. There's very few things that make a user care about security until they get affected, till something happens to them. And so you have to find the balance between allowing convenience and also enforcing security. So there's a middle ground there. But also, when it comes, we've already seen one big change, right? We've already the IP convergence into industrial protocols. And yep. So you've already seen, I know people hate that word convergence, but just depends on what you're talking about when you're referring to convergence. There has already been a convergence with IT and OT. I mean, if you're using network switches, if you're using IP protocol encapsulating industrial protocols, that's convergence, people, whether you like it or not. And ever since that happened, right? Why did they do that? Why did they take IP communication and encapsulate it on top of industrial communication? Convenience, right? Because we're getting data from point A to point B faster now. We can do this. So convenience wins out. And people can kick and scream and say SCADA is never going to cloud, but it's already starting to happen. Yeah. And I mean, well, first of all, SCADA is already in the cloud, right? How do you think you're remotely communicating from one geographical location to your control room? It's going over, whether it's a private frame or encrypted or whatever. I mean, it's going somewhere. It is going into the cloud. Now, I understand what people mean. You're communicating through a cloud, but SCADA in the cloud is a different concept, and I understand that. But guess what? It's already happening, and people want the convenience. People want things to be easy. They want things to be. They want things to work. They want it functional. So at the end of the day, if it helps a company's bottom line, if it is able to save them money, make them more money, it's going to happen. And as cybersecurity professionals, we are picking up we're picking up the slack. We basically have to be reactive, and we have to say, well, you want to do this, it's coming, how do we deal with it? But you can change that reactive nature into predictive analysis, being proactive, predictively proactive, calculating the right formulas, crunching the right numbers, and that can't be some giant, huge industry metric, right? That has to be individual. It has to be only you know what is going to be, or what the statistical outcomes will be in your company, your environment, because your company is different than another company. Sure. So, everybody's calling for these global metrics and risk analysis and things like that. And I'm against that, because there is never going to be a one-size-fits-all metric for your risk analysis. You always have to have local parameters. You always have to have local data that's going to, I'm being redundant here, but it all has to be localized to the environment in question. So if you have the ability to take your data that's custom to you and crunch those numbers, I mean, to me, that's like the holy grail algorithm is basically saying, here's my data, here's my assets, here's my environment. Oh, I made a change. What does that do? Oh, I need to do this and I only have this much budget. What do I do? Like you were talking about earlier. You basically have to have the holy grail algorithm with the holy grail data set from your environment that gives you all these answers. And it's coming. It will happen.
Yeah, double tapping on that, right, is you can have two facilities that were built on the same day by the same engineering plans, right next door to each other, or even two units in the same facility, right, or two manufacturing lines or whatever that thing is. And beyond that day one when they were turned on, they're never the same again.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. They've got the same hardware, but they've got different configurations. They've got different firmwares. You've done different things to them because I've got one operator on one side, one on another, or the same operator and he just didn't get to the second one. Like those paths converge and they're never the same again, unless at some point you do a true up and you bring and you bring it all back together, right? But that never happens. Like you're never going to have, even within one organization, every site, every unit, every system is different. It's unique. I can have the exact same hardware. I can standardize on the hardware. It's never the same. And it never will be, and it's never going to be. So to your point, I can't use a generic template. Yeah. Is a generic template valuable? Yes. It is better than nothing.
It's a baseline. It's something. It's a template. It's a template. It's something to get you started.
Yeah, but it's never going to get you the level of detail that we're talking about, and the opportunity is there. Like it was so complex in the past, which is why we've had to go with templates, and it's why we've had to go with these generic models and theoretical type things. But machine learning and AI really opens up the door to the complexity, because it removes that barricade, that glass ceiling of, we just don't have enough, like I can't hire enough PhD people to do that. But when you open up Pandora's box of that AI ML conversation, it really changes the metrics and it makes it a lot more attainable. And ChatGPT is a great example of that, not because it's related, but because people now understand, oh wow, like that's really helpful. Like I can put in an email that I wrote, copy and paste it into ChatGPT, and it checks the spell check. It puts it in a different language for me. It does a lot of cool things instantly, right? I can take a few prompts, throw it into ChatGPT, and it's really good at language. So it can kick that stuff out really quickly. And a task that took me people and hours of time, me trying to figure out and troubleshoot or whatever, I can do that really quickly. Even code, like I can take code and copy and paste it in there, and it's checking for errors again, because that's what it's trained to do. In the same way, this language model, or not language model, but the ML and AI capabilities that you're talking about, we can train those models on the ICS, on security things, on ports and protocols, on the way a PLC behaves, and all of that type of stuff, so that it, in the same way that ChatGPT is good at language, this model can be good at calculating risk based upon factors of IP and vulnerabilities and all the attack paths and how the players attack and all that kind of stuff, it can get really good really quickly, without having as many people needing to be telling it all the things to do and all the steps to take.
Yeah, and I think that what is making this achievable is because there's two different categories we're kind of talking about here, and one is like the classical traditional machine learning and training your process, your algorithm to be able to figure all this out. And then there's a shortcut right now with large language models. And so if you can have a data set and train, like you were saying, and we talked about this at Black Hat, right? About, let's take a data set and let's train it specifically on cybersecurity and also specifically on OT cybersecurity. Now, if we have that data set that is specifically trained, it is really a shortcut to getting that level of analysis that classic traditional machine learning training would do, because now you're using the large language models regressive analysis capabilities to really it takes upon the step of, or it takes the place of the step where doing it the classical way, we had to use something like Python and pandas and write our code, and we had to come up with the algorithm, and we had to figure all this out. Well, instead of trying to build my own algorithm and use my own math and all of that, things like large language models, not just ChatGPT, but let's just call it, like, ChatGPT is based on a large language model. But if we have a specially trained large language model, then what we can do is the generative AI, the generative AI capabilities of a large language model allows it to be the algorithm. It'll come up with its own algorithm. It'll come up with its own analysis as long as you have the right data. So it makes that level of data analysis and building algorithms more accessible, because it really does it on its own. And I've tried this out. You could do this. Go into ChatGPT if you have Plus. Use the ChatGPT 4 and use the code interpreter, and just give it a huge data set, and just tell it to, hey, start asking it questions on that data set. Come up with some conclusions. Come up with some analysis. Give me some charts and graphs, and it'll start to do all that. Previously, we had to do all that manually. We had to come up with our own algorithms. We had to come up with our own code to charts and graphs and everything like that. And so now, using something like, even Claude 2 is even better. Now, Claude 2 by Anthropic won't actually produce the charts and the graphs for you, but it could create code that can. And you can feed up to 100,000 tokens to Claude 2. So you can feed bigger data sets. So just try it out. Take a huge data set, CSV files, whatever, and just paste it into Claude 2. Paste it into ChatGPT's code interpreter and say, hey, what are the conclusions from this? What is this telling me? And it will analyze it on its own. That is a huge step forward, because now anybody can do data analytics, or at least start to, without having to code your own Python pandas, your own TensorFlows and all that stuff. It's kind of already in the box. So really now, to do this thing, right, is just train a specialized large language model and then come up with the right prompts and the right code to make use of it. And I guess that's kind of a good call to action, right? Because this is what we were talking about at Black Hat, you and I, was we were talking about, like, we as an industry can create that large language model. And that's kind of something I've already started working on. And it's something that I'm, hopefully I'm going to be presenting this. Dale Peterson has already accepted my presentation for S424, but we're kind of up in the air what I'm going to present. It's going to be something dealing with AI and OT, but I think this is what I want to, and we'll see if he'll accept this one, but I want to, as a community, as an industry, build this large language model, train this large language model. And it's going to take a community to do it.
Sure.
And train this large language model so that we, as a community, as an industry, can use it. And by the way, that's what's needed for cybersecurity, because you cannot use large language models for cybersecurity because you're pushing that data into the cloud. You're pushing it through the API. But if we created our own specialized cybersecurity related, OT cybersecurity related large language model, you could use that locally. And nothing goes to the cloud. It's all right here. It stays within on-prem in your system. So that's really what I think, because in order to do all of this that we're talking about, it is going to require a really high quality, security focused, security trained large language model. And so that's kind of like, that's my call to action, people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was gonna bring that back home, right, and ask that question or put a caveat in there is, people, we're not recommending that you go take your cybersecurity logs and throw them into ChatGPT. That, please hear us. That's not what we're saying. But what we are saying is that if you had that ability in an on-prem, and that's the thing that has come around as well, is you can do this on-prem. Like, you can do this without having to have supercomputers like you used to, right, to be able to crunch this type of calculations, right? You can do this with GPUs and the hardware that we have, and you don't have to spend hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to set this up. Are you going to be able to do it as fast? No, but that's not the point, right? The point is that, you can start this in small on-prem ways, that you can start crunching this and start feeding in all of these tools and all of this data to start building and learning and training this thing. So yes, to your point, having this template or this starting point of that large language model of cybersecurity, especially in OT, that's your starting point. Then you download that, you put it in your environment, and then you start feeding it your data and you start training it on your environment. What are your firewall logs doing? What are you getting data from these environments? And it starts learning more and more about your environment, because what I do at site A versus site B is different. So it needs to know that. So it's going to see those differences. So the more data that you're feeding it, the better it's going to be at knowing, okay, I've got this new product. I really envision it in my head as almost like a Visio template, right? You drop in the Palo Alto icon, and you drop in the Cisco 3650 icon, and you drop in the VMware icon, and with that is all the ports and services that it knows about and all that kind of stuff. And then you use that and you kind of draw your network diagram of where everything is and kind of how the data flows, et cetera. And then you feed it data from those systems. But that you then get a more than static picture, architecture view, asset inventory, like all that stuff becomes, instead of just being this static document that is on the shelf, it becomes something that you can use in this risk and in your program to dynamically, so that when somebody's putting something in, that thing is getting updated, and that understanding of my risks, my vulnerabilities, all these things becomes a dynamic thing that everybody in my organization has access to. And when it triggers, certain things, then the CIO or the CISO is getting oh, wait a minute, we don't want to do that. And that can be part of the change request board and all that kind of stuff. Like, we're not approved. We don't like that risk. It's too risky. What else could we do? How do we mitigate that? Like, it becomes exponentially powerful in all of these ways, from documentation to change management to, understanding my asset inventory and really learning and red teaming and blue teaming, and all of this stuff becomes easy.
Well, it should, right? And here's the thing that, if you have a SIM, a pane of glass that is supposed to be an aggregator, okay, here's the holy grail of a SIM. You need to have, when you do your asset inventory, all that data gets put in there. If I do a vulnerability assessment, all that data needs to be put in there, and it is correlated to my assets. Yeah. If I do a gap assessment, now all of a sudden I have these standards. So a standards-based gap assessment analysis goes in there. All the controls. So every single thing that you do, from a pen test to vulnerability assessment to a gap assessment, is all data. And this is one thing that I'm teaching literally right now is the subject that I'm teaching in my ICS OT Cybersecurity Masterclass, which is this data. Everything that you do is data that you're gathering for the purpose of making decisions on risk. And if you're not doing that, it's wasted money and it's wasted time. So your SIM, your aggregator, It should have the ability to take in every bit of data from every risk assessment, vulnerability assessment, pen test, gap analysis that you do, and it should correlate it to all of your systems, your assets, your network data paths. It should correlate all of that. Then that's where you stick this algorithm that's able to crunch the numbers and crunch everything and give you an active, living change management, predictive risk analysis solution. So it's like a living risk assessment. And it should always be able to tell you in real time, based on all the data that you feed it, what your current risk profile is and where that's the master holy grail algorithm system, SIM system, and everything like that. And quite frankly, that's, you go back to full circle of what we talked about. When you have all of that, you add game theory, you add machine learning analysis, you add large language model analysis, you've got Jarvis in a box as a CISO. I mean, that's what we're talking about.
It is. And the exciting thing to me, and it's why I think we both have these smiles on our face and we get so energetic when we're talking about it, right, is 5 years ago, that's a pipe dream. It's whatever, right? You could never do that. There's no way we could do that. It's too complex, blah, blah, blah. Now, it's not unrealistic, right? We're really not that far away from having that capability. Now, nobody said this is easy. There's a lot of factors that go into it. You got to make sure, obviously, when you connect everything, there's risks, and I got to secure things, all of that, obviously, right? The point is that capability is almost, if not now, accessible. And I think really the only reason it's not now is because nobody's created that language model, right? That model for OT cybersecurity, because the machine learning, the AI, the compute power, the data set exists. It's just a matter of tying all those things together in this fashion, right?
Yep. Well, and it goes back to, I think that we have a community of both individuals as well as organizations that would be willing to contribute to this data set, right? You can produce things that aren't in your detriment, like these standards organizations, right? So NIST, that's public domain anyway, but you can grab all the NIST data, right? You can have organizations like ISA and IEC that could, I understand it's licensed material, and that's how they make some money off that. But at some point, you have to start making some decisions and say, well, number one, what's good for the community? What's good for the industry? Number two, if your data is not in there, you're actually shooting yourself in the foot, because if your standards are not included in this data set, people aren't going to be able to use information from it. They're not going to be able to glean any strategies from it. So they're not going to use your standards. So it's a double-edged sword, or a double-edged or a double benefit, depending on how you look at it. So, we have companies that can contribute data sets to sanitized and all of that. So, but it will take that much. It's going to take a lot of us saying, hey, this is what proper PLC code should look like. This is what secure PLC code should look like. This is what ladder logic looks like. This is what function block looks like. This is what, so this is what an OT network looks like. And because right now, for the most part, it doesn't know that as well. It knows some of it, but it doesn't know it in depth because it hasn't been given that data set and hasn't been trained on that. So,
it's and taking that a step further, like you just said, there's a lot of nerds like me and you that have a lot of equipment sitting on their back cabinet, and they play with it at home, and they're buying stuff off eBay, and they're building these OT environments. And that's going to help them from a training perspective, but it's also data that we could be feeding into this thing and learning as they're playing, as they're connecting, as they're interconnecting, as they're patching and doing their own red teaming or whatever they're doing in their home labs. And again, I interact with nerds just like me all the time on nerds, geeks, whatever you want to call them, right? On LinkedIn and the labs that people are building in their houses. It's incredible. Like, there's a lot of people that are very passionate about this and are working in their spare time on their weeknights and weekends as their hobby, so that they can get better at their job. Because most of the people that I know and I work with in this, just like you, I've been in this for 25 plus years. So I've had a lot of interconnections in a lot of different verticals and a lot of different businesses. Most of the people that I come across are passionate about this, right? Way before it was ever called cybersecurity, I was doing network security and InfoSec and, whatever you want to call it. But we were always very passionate about making sure that the availability was there, that we were protecting the environment and making sure that, no unauthorized access, like all of that type of stuff. And it's exciting that we're on the cusp of making some huge leaps in a positive direction, which leads me to my question, my wrap up question here that I know is coming in the next 5 to 10 years, and I can probably expect maybe what some of your thoughts are. But what's one positive and maybe one scary thing that you see on the horizon with cyber in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, my answer is the same for both of those, and it is the where we're going with large language models. I think that large language models and all of the effort that's being put into them right now, because the cat's out of the bag, Pandora's box is open. You're not going to stuff it back in, so it's already happened, especially with local open source models being available and stuff like that. So I think that from a cybersecurity and a risk management perspective, large language models are going to revolutionize the industry, and I'm excited about that. But unfortunately, they're also revolutionizing the cybercrime industry, and it's going to be two sides of the yin and yang fighting each other. But that happens anytime you introduce anything new, anything that's technological and advancement. It can be used for good and for evil. So yeah. But I think that just like the invention of the automobile, the printing press, and the internet all shrank the world, right? Yeah. They shrank the world. The world got smaller because information and news and travel all happen faster, in a more accessible. But I think what's going to happen is, while those things shrank the world and also in general made us smarter, for good or for better or for worse, where AI is going is it's going to accelerate all of that exponentially. But instead of making the world smaller, it's going to make everything, it's going to accelerate the speed of our evolution, and technologically and how things happen, right? I mean, because of AI, as it moves forward, not just cybersecurity, I mean, this is going to give us, when you combine what's happening with LLM, and this is my second answer, and quantum computing is also something that's very scary and also very exciting. When you combine quantum computing with where we're going with large language models, I'm telling you right now, we are on the process of being able to solve every disease. We're nearing the ability to solve every disease, find the secrets of the universe, finally determine whether or not we're living in a simulation or not, and but at the same time, I guess that also brings with it terrible destruction, right? We are also accelerating the ability at nutcases out there that want to destroy the world, the accessibility and the speed at which they can develop something purely devastating. And, we're not even talking about, aliens or the takeover of our cyber overlords or anything like that being a possibility. I think that just AI and quantum computing is exciting and is scary enough all on its own before we even unleash that and become, it becomes our overlords, or, we find out that, it's all aliens. So,
yeah, I agree. I love it. All right, man, you got a lot of irons in the fire. Why don't you tell us, you talked about your classes that you've got, the ThreatGEN, Red Team, Blue Team. Why don't you tell us a little bit about, how can people take your classes, learn if they want to get into OT, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So number one, if you want to play Red Team versus Blue Team, if you want a fun, exciting experience, learning the big picture cybersecurity and strategy and how it all fits together, whether you're learning or you're an executive or a technical person, it doesn't matter. And you want to see how that is, or do something. In fact, I'm releasing an article today on the IR table hub exercises are broken and how to fix them. But so if you were, want to do Red Team, Blue Team, something fun, IR tabletops in a different way, you can go to threatgen.com and check that out. You can also go to threatgen.com if you're interested in my ICS OT cybersecurity masterclass, which is where we actually take all the stuff that we're talking right now. It's not your traditional ICS cybersecurity class. I mean, I tell you like it is. I'm a very blunt, straightforward person. I'll tell you like it is. I'll give my opinions, but I'm also using cutting edge techniques, like doing different ways of using using machine learning, using LLMs for analysis and things like that. So I'm putting these cutting edge techniques into my program, and I'm trying to stay current. So if you want to learn ICS OT cybersecurity from my perspective and all my techniques that I've used, you can find that as well at threatgen.com under our courses. And then finally, if you want to learn everything that we're talking about, if you want to learn how to train your own large language models, if you want to learn how to use large language models, generative AI, and all of this stuff, machine learning in cybersecurity, I just have a brand new class that just started. It's a live course. It's going to go on for the next few months, but you can jump in anytime because all the recordings are available. It is my Mastering AI with Cybersecurity course, and all of my AI related stuff you can find at cybersuperhuman.ai. That's all of my AI related courses and all that. So if you want to learn how to use Python and pandas and machine learning and train your large language models, how to do it yourself, you want to learn how to create this large language model that we're talking about, this cybersecurity large language model. You want to learn how to do it on your own, build your own apps on top of AI for cybersecurity. Then that's at cybersuperhuman.ai. And by the way, I have one technique that I'm using that's really cool is basically, and I have a video on my YouTube channel out there too. You can just search for Cyber Superhuman AI on YouTube. But being able to take some code, combine that with large language models, and put it on top of Kali Linux. So now I don't know anything about Kali Linux. I don't know how to use this. I don't know what this means. You just tell it using natural language. I want to scan my network, and it will automatically come up with the right nmap command and everything like that, and execute it for you on your terminal. You can say things like, "Oh, I want to scan my network. I want to grab all the literally just tell it this. I want to scan my network. I want to grab all the IP addresses that are open. I want to look to see if there's a web. I want to do this and this and this and this, and just talk to it like it's a person, and it automatically comes up with the right commands and runs it on the computer appropriately. So if you want to learn how to do stuff like that, then go take my course."
That's awesome, man. Everybody needs to sign up. I'll have the links in the show notes there, so you can click the links, all the ones that Clint just talked about, and look forward for hopefully lots of folks sign up, because we need a lot more people that are knowledgeable in this space to help us defend all this stuff, right?
You know what? And I'm going to do something right now on the spot, on the fly. I'm going to do this right now. I'm going to put right after the show, I'm going to put this up. So if you use code Aaron Crow 23, and we'll put that in there, then you can get 50% off all my courses.
That's awesome, guys. That's a great offer. So we'll put that link in there, Aaron Crow 23, and you guys get 50% off the courses. That's amazing. Awesome. Thank you, sir. Look forward to seeing you at S4.
Absolutely. Yep. And sooner, maybe, because I mean, you're just right down the road from me, relatively speaking. So, next time I head over there, we'll go grab a coffee or a beer or 10.
Exactly. Awesome, man. Thank you, sir.
All right.
Thanks for listening to the Protect OT Cybersecurity Podcast. If you got some valuable information from today's show, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. To learn more about Aaron and to get your free copy of the OT Cybersecurity Solution Buyer's Guide, go to industrialdefender.com. That's industrialdefender.com, or you can click the link in the show notes.